It by Stephen King is one of the most influential and iconic horror novels ever written. Here's why I think it's overrated. Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for today's video, I will be doing a Stephen King book review. And I plan on doing a lot of these throughout the year, even though I don't plan on actually rereading these books, because last year in 2022, I reread so much Stephen King. It took up a lot of my reading time. I still plan on doing a lot of Stephen King book reviews because I do have a lot of Stephen King opinions that I want to get out there. I'm not necessarily going to do book reviews or Stephen King book reviews for books that I just absolutely love, because I feel like those tend to be a bit boring and monotonous of just like praising it. So I probably won't be doing a book review for something like The Dead Zone, because that's my all-time favorite. I really don't have any complaints about it. I think it's more fun and more informative to talk about Stephen King books that I either hate and like getting my grievances out, or stuff that I think is overrated. And while I do enjoy it for what it is, I do have significant complaints with it. And that's essentially what today's video is going to be. Because today I will be reviewing It, which, while I do enjoy this book, I do believe it is one of the more overrated Stephen King books. When I did my updated Stephen King ranking list that came out last week, out of all of the 78 books that Stephen King has written, I believe I put this at number 37, which might surprise a lot of people, because a lot of people, when they read It, they would immediately put it into their top 10, their top 5, or for a lot of constant readers, their number 1 spot. And I completely understand why it's such a beloved horror book and why it's a lot of people's favorite Stephen King book, but for the sake of being just a contrarian, I do have a lot of problems with it that keeps it from being a 5-star book. Now, don't get the wrong impression. I don't hate this book by any means. And it's certainly not King's most overrated book. If you want my opinion on that, it's probably either The Stand or 11/22/63. For me, it is great. I give the book 4 stars. It's got a few significant things that keeps it from being like a 5-star all-time great book. It is certainly far from being a perfect book in my mind. But enough of the preamble. Let's go ahead and jump right into the review. And for anyone who's been living under a rock for however many years, the novel It by Stephen King was first published in the year 1986, and essentially the premise is that these group of people who were close friends in the 50s in the town Derry, Maine, are now all adults, and they're all starting to realize that the problem that they were facing as children, It, the entity known as It, has essentially returned, and they have to return to their hometown of Derry to face off again. And yeah, to be fair, I do love the premise of this book and how essentially the entity known as It can essentially take the form of an individual's fear and use it against them. Pretty cool concept, although he probably took that idea from Phantoms, a novel by Dean Koontz written in 1983 that he did blurb, so he definitely read this book, and he definitely borrowed some elements of that book to make It. Not a criticism by any means, but I am pointing that fact out. Anyway, I figured I'd start out the review lightly with some stuff that I actually enjoy about the novel, which there is a lot to enjoy about this novel. First and foremost, the characters, or the Losers Club, the 7 group of kids and then adults who actually form up the majority of this novel. Their characterization is phenomenal. Some of the best character work that Stephen King has ever done. That's definitely one of the main draws of the book, and why so many people latch on to this ginormous novel is because you get so much detail about the characters and their lives and their thought processes and what they're doing, their motivations. You really get a sense of knowing these people both as children and as adults. And getting those interwoven throughout the novel is a very cool concept, and it's the reason why this novel is infamous and loved by many constant readers. And it's definitely very impressive how King can write all of these characters, or at least, the Losers Club, as children and adults, and flip back and forth between the two perspectives. And sometimes literally fall into a perspective where the adult will kind of be, just living their life, and then they kind of one character is like on a plane, and then all of a sudden he starts remembering their childhood, and then, it literally falls into their childhood perspective and just falls right into their perspective. And I think that's really well done here. King is also normally very good with friendships. He has friendships throughout a lot of his novels. You've got different seasons with something like The Body, and then even some of his newer stuff like Doomadgee. You've got Egbert Freemantle and Wireman having a very close relationship. But many people would cite The Losers Club as probably being his best found family trope and best friendships in any of the books that he's ever written. And I would agree that it's definitely one of the best. There's also just a lot of memorable scenes in this book that you really can't get out of your head, and that after you read the book you think a lot about. Just a lot of iconic moments in horror are laden throughout this entire book. It's also a novel that's sort of rich in thematic content too. You've got themes of childhood trauma and kind of returning to your past. You've got themes of the adults in here, the actual people in here, sort of being the real monsters, and just, there's a lot to unpack in this novel. Obviously, the monster, the entity known as It, is doing horrific things, but you look carefully throughout the novel, and the adults, the parents, and just the people in the town are doing just as worse stuff, if not worse stuff, to the people in their own town. And also just the cycle of abuse that can happen, because, kind of the thing in here is Pennywise returns every 27 years. So there's just a lot to unpack in this novel. And while I don't typically find Stephen King supernatural stuff to be scary, I usually don't find supernatural stuff to be that terrifying. I'm more afraid of realistic horror, so something like Misery or Gerald's Game or Cujo. Those three novels are probably his scariest books in my mind. It does have some horrific scenes in here, horrific scenes of violence and abuse, and it's definitely one of his creepiest novels. Often fans cite this as his scariest. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but I understand where they're coming from. So while there is a lot to love with this book has a lot to offer, and it has a lot of pros for me, has a lot of stuff that I love about it. There is a fair amount of things that I don't really like about this book, and that really grinds my gears, and that keep it from being an all-time favorite of mine, and definitely demote it down to being a 4-star book rather than a 5-star book that a lot of people would say it is, and they say, it's their all-time favorite King book. It'll never be my all-time favorite King book, and here's why. So I'll go ahead and mention off the top, the main reason why I don't love this book isn't because of that final scene. And if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read the book, you probably still know what I'm talking about, because it's very infamous. I really don't like that scene, but it's not the main reason why it gets demoted. I might get demoted like a half star or a quarter star of that scene, just because I don't really feel it's significant. I think it's kind of a throwaway, oh, look how disturbing I can be sort of scene. It doesn't really feel like it serves a clear purpose. I really don't like that scene, but it's not the main reason why I don't love this book. So I figured I would get that out of the way if you were thinking oh, he's going to really demote a star because of that scene. That's not the main reason. Overall, my main criticism of this book, and longtime viewers will probably already know what I'm about to say, is its length and its pacing. Good God, this is a chunky ass book. You could literally take someone out with this brick of a book. And while it's not the most egregious of King books of being overly long, something like The Stand is just like, it's a slog to get through for me. And to be fair, a lot of chunky Stephen King books I have an issue with. The main reason with this book, it's not necessarily that there's unnecessary scenes. I feel like all of the scenes in here are integral to the plot and to the characters. They always add something to the story, so it's not like there's a lot of like just dumb scenes in here that I wish he would take out. The main reason is the actual word length of the scenes. Like a lot of these scenes, even though they are good at times, and most of the time, they just take way too long, and it could have been reduced down. Like every scene in here probably could have been taken down like a few hundred words or so, and probably overall, you could probably take out maybe like 100, 150 pages, maybe even 200 pages. Just make it a more tight and succinct novel. And for me, that would have been much better. That would have easily given it another half star. And I know a lot of people love this because of how immersive it is. You get all of the details, the superfluous details of everything, of all the characters in the town, and just what they're doing at all times, and just a lot of just detail that I don't care about, right? So it's not that the scenes themselves are bad, they just go on way too long. And there's a particular scene, this isn't like a spoiler scene, but there's like a point in the past where a kid is at a pharmacy and the pharmacist is explaining something to them, and it goes on forever. Like it could have been a 2-paragraph thing, but it goes on forever. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, where is the editor of this book? Who edited this book? For me, probably this book could have been edited down a lot. That's my main criticism of the book. I love the characters and I love the story, but good God, it takes forever to fucking get there. I will say my history with this book, I've read this book twice now, maybe 3 times. I think twice though. The very first time I read this physically, and that was a long time ago, and I gave it 3 stars then, so I was even worse the first time I read it. I think though what helped me is the audiobook. The audio experience, doing an immersion reading, like listening to the audiobook while physically reading along to it, definitely improved my overall enjoyment of the book. I can't remember the narrator, but I'll put his name up here. He did a fantastic job doing all of the voices and just the overall narration. That definitely boosted up my rating quite a bit. It was more easy to digest, but still, there's a lot of times in this book where I wished King would just wrap it up or just be more succinct with his storytelling. And I know a lot of people just love the immersion of having a long King book, but I just have the unpopular opinion that it just goes on for way too long. So my next criticism I can't really talk about without going into spoilers. So I'll have a quick spoiler banner up here. I shouldn't spend a lot of time on here, but when the spoiler banner goes off, you can watch the video again. One of my main criticisms with this book is how stupid all of the turtle shit is. In the first time you read this, like the main character, God, what's his name, Ben, or obviously one of the main characters, but he keeps like quietly mentioning a turtle, and you kind of read that, you're just like, I don't know what this is about, but okay, whatever. And then you finally get to it, and it's just like an all-powerful, all-knowing turtle who's like always existed in another dimension. And then you figure out that Pennywise is like the evil entity of a dimension. All of that crap is bullshit. I don't like that. It's just one of those instances where I wish we would have just not gotten an explanation. It would have been much creepier if it's just this entity exists, and like you could hint that it's from like outer space and that it, crashed here. But all of the turtle bullshit I really just did not like, and that definitely demoted it. And it really threw me for a loop the first time I read it, because I grew up watching, like that 1990 miniseries, and that's not really in it. So reading that for the first time, I'm just like, what the fuck is this? I really didn't enjoy all of the turtle stuff. All right, back to the non-spoilery criticisms. I will talk about the ending, not in any spoiler fashion. I just will say overall the ending I felt was anticlimactic, which for a novel of this length, it's sort of hard to avoid because you just build up, this entity, this evil entity so much, and you're just like, how in the world are you going to defeat this thing? And just the way that it happens, the way that it all concludes, is just kind of dumb in my mind. And not even like excluding the weird scene that everybody hates, excluding that, which obviously most people don't like. Just the overall ending I thought was subpar, which I know a lot of people can forgive it because the rest of the book they feel is so good. But for me to have a book this long and to have an ending not that great, like it's not terrible. Like he has worse endings. Like The Stand, I still say is one of the worst endings ever. Whatever. The It ending, it's not terrible. It's just lackluster and subpar. He has much better endings in his catalog. Everybody gives Stephen King a bad rap for having bad endings. It's mostly for like It and The Stand, but he has a lot of terrific endings, and I have a video of that. Shameless plug. But overall, like I said, the ending to this book leaves much to be desired. I don't love it, and it's just one of those reasons why I don't love to go back and reread his longer books that I know have poor endings, because you just get all of this build up and it's not for much. All right, so to wrap up my review for It, I do think it's overrated. I, however, do not hate this book. I do actually enjoy it. I give it 4 stars. I love the characters. I love the premise. I love the story. I love the themes. My main criticisms with it, however, keeping it from being a perfect book, is definitely the pacing and the page length and the overall ending for multiple reasons. And then the one spoiler thing that I can't really mention here that I think is dumb as shit. Overall, those things do demote it down a bit, but overall, I completely understand why this would be a lot of people's favorites and why they would give it 5 stars. If you give it 5 stars, good for you, but I just have a different opinion. All right, so that is my review for the novel It by Stephen King. What did you guys think of my review? Do you agree with me on some of these points, or do you disagree with me and think that I'm an idiot? Also, how do you guys feel about it? How would you rate it? Is it one of your favorites? Is it one of your least favorites? Or are you kind of in the middle like me? Please leave all of your comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the YouTube channel and the Book Astronomer Discord. I also have my Patreon if you want to go support me there. I have my Amazon wishlist if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a fantastic day.